tan fiel que le había sido a un niño el perro. Mira cómo se va un viejo, mira cómo se va un viejo.
Hello all, welcome to the national webinar, Land for People, Not for Profit. We will get started shortly, so in the meantime, please put your name, organization, city, and phone number you're calling from in the chat box. Right, thank you.
Mañana te agarran el pie, pasado te ha chupado entero. La vida no le dejó nada al amor. ¿Cuántos clavos he clavado? ¿Cuántos árboles regué?
Yeah, so welcome everybody to the national webinar for Land for People, Not for Profit, hosted by Right to the City, Homes for All. I'm Carmina Calderon. I'm an organizer with the East LA Community Corporation, and I'll be co-facilitating with Davin.
Hello, Davin Cardenas, Homes for All, Right to the City, National Field Organizer.
Nice. So we are gonna start off with having our sister Melissa, also from the East LA Community Corporation, start us off with a song.
And actually, and really quickly, folks are gonna be getting on slowly. Okay. And we're just asking that as you get on, if you can put your name and your preferred gender pronoun and your organization you're with in the chat box as you get on. That would be super, super helpful. Yeah, and I think that's it for now. Mel, you want to take it away?
Yes. Hello, saludos everybody. Here we are in Occupy Tongva territory, Los Angeles. We are part of a group called El Rio, and we'll be sharing a song that's called Viento, or wind. And it's just to honor the element of the wind that carries our consignas, our chants, our song throughout the everyday struggle, and just always remembering to stay connected to Mother Earth as we walk on her, on her soil, just staying connected and remembering and listening to the advice that she gives us. So this is To the Wind.
Quisiera ser el viento y soplar por toda eternidad. Si yo fuera el viento, sería el suspiro detrás de tu gritar. Tus gritos de libertad que alumbran nuestro caminar. Y yo como el viento sueño con las hojas volar, volar, volar. Gracias a esta tierra es verde y fértil, que alumbra mi alma y me enseña a vivir. Hay muchos que la abandonan
So
Thank you all. I'm gonna drop in our Instagram handle. Give us a follow.
thank you. Carmina, you want to take it? Can't hear you.
Yes, thank you, Meli and El Rio, for sharing your beautiful music with us. We want to take the time to also uplift that language justice is one of our core principles. To share our approach to language justice, I will turn it over to Vero and Margot from Wepa Translations, who will be interpreting the call today in Spanish, and Edward Garcia will be translating in the chat box into Spanish.
For language justice means that you should be able to listen to this in your language of choice. In this case, we're doing it in Spanish for you. Because Spanish is a longer language than English, we are asking all of the English speakers to please speak slowly and clearly so that we can follow it. And we have more to say in Spanish than you guys have to say in English because we have more words. So please do that for us. We'll also be doing gender justice. So we will be saying e instead of a and o in Spanish to make it gender non-specific. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gracias.
And we're gonna go over a couple tech considerations. Next slide. So yeah, feel free, y'all are online. If your computer's faulty or the internet's faulty, you can always call in as well. And there's under the microphone on Zoom, you can bring it up. It says switch to phone audio and it'll get you the instructions there. And you can also unmute by tapping the mute button to unmute. If you're on your phone, you can *6 to unmute yourself. And that'll be relevant towards the end of the call when we start bringing in questions and that. So, and also feel free to add questions during the presentation into the chat box, and we'll field them and we'll start kind of compiling them to put them to Michael as the presentation goes on. So feel free to add questions on what you're hearing into the chat box, and then we'll have space towards the end of the presentation to also hear from you and hear questions from the folks on the call. Carmina?
Yeah, so before we pass it on to our guest, Michael Beltran, I wanted to speak on some of the work that we've been doing here to reclaim land here locally. I work for ELAC, the East LA Community Corporation. It's a community organization that advocates for housing and socioeconomic justice in the Los Angeles East Side. Our ultimate goal is for housing to be decommodified and a human right. We do that by organizing grassroots issue campaigns and by building affordable housing ourselves, and seeding other autonomous organizations such as community land trusts. So I'm the lead organizer for ELAC's equitable development organizational work, especially around housing near public transportation. And so ELAC is part of the Development Without Displacement, Our Homes, Our Land translocal tracks in Right to the City, Homes for All. And in addition to tenant protections, the Our Homes, Our Land, Development Without Displacement translocal track was another strategy against displacement of our communities. And the track focuses on equitable development without displacement, as well as a long-term vision of community control of land and housing. And just to talk about what's happened recently, last Saturday, inspired by the Moms for Housing in Oakland, a group of homeless moms from Oakland who occupied a vacant investor-owned property to demand the right for housing, Well, ELAC joined with a group of community orgs supporting the reclaimers and are calling on the city and the state to immediately use all vacant publicly owned properties to house people. The state transit agency, Caltrans, acquired several vacant homes in the neighborhood of El Sereno in Los Angeles as a part of the freeway expansion back in the 70s. And so Caltrans has become kind of like a slumlord, and their tenants have even created a tenants union. And now with the fast development of the coronavirus, there's a new urgency to their demands to house all publicly owned properties to use the publicly owned properties for housing immediately. So we got support from 8 legislators. Sorry, I'll slow down a little bit. Through the work that we have been doing, supporting, we've been able to get the support of 8 legislators, and we're trying to apply more pressure on the state governor of California. And I can add the endorsement form on the chat box if y'all want to support. And yeah, I'll give it off to Davin.
Hey, this is Carla. Actually, I'm here at the site. I wanted to see if reclaimers can say hi to everyone. So this is Carla with ELAC. I work with Carmina.
Please, Carla.
I can get folks to talk real quick.
For our community. We need volunteers out here. If you guys can come through, you're more than welcome to.
Ruby, so there folks are saying hi from the webinar. You can say hi and tell your story.
Yeah, so my name is Ruby Gordillo. I'm one of the reclaimers with Reclaiming Our Homes. We're out here at 3216 Sheffield Avenue, where I've reclaimed a home for my family. In this time of need, in this time of a health crisis, we're calling out to elected officials to open up the space, these vacant houses owned by the city, by the state, the county, Metro, LAUSD, all of them, to be opened up for those who are underhoused or unhoused. We need shelter in the storm, and that's why we're here today.
Awesome. Thank you, Ruby.
Thank you.
Y'all, a little look. We got a few more homes down here, and then we have like a home down there. So there's a total 6 homes now that have been reclaimed, and we're gonna be here until we get the homes. So I'm gonna log off. Bye, y'all.
Thank you so much, Carla.
Thank you, Carla.
Beautiful. Then I'm actually gonna pass it on to Catherine. Catherine Assault to say a couple words about the organizing that's happening in Vallejo. Catherine, can you say a couple words?
Yeah, for sure. Can folks hear me?
Yeah, if you could speak up a little bit, that'd be great.
Okay, cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Catherine. I work actually at the UC Davis Bulacan Center for Filipino Studies, but we've been in partnership with Migrante Napa Solano, based in Vallejo, California. And I think some folks have heard about this story, but last year, this corporation called Reliant bought out an apartment complex called Strawberry Hills in Vallejo, which is mainly home to elderly, immigrant, mainly Filipino tenants and their families. And they were given 110% rent increases beginning in April all the way to June. But starting in June, a lot of elderly immigrant women banded together and organized their complex against Reliance. And throughout the summer, we've been working with them in connecting them with other organizations in Vallejo fighting for housing justice. And they were able to pass a rent moratorium to cap rents at 10%, which was amazing. And not only did they stop at Vallejo City Council, but they actually went to their state legislators and really fought for AB 1482, which has also helped cap rents even more. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those organizers. A lot of them are, of course, over 65 and probably staying at home, trying to be safe and healthy. But just wanted to give them a shout out because their struggle is also really reminiscent of the international hotel struggle in San Francisco in the 1970s, which was a huge moment for the tenant and housing justice movement. And to really give a shout out to folks in the Filipino diaspora who are fighting for housing justice. Thanks, everybody.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Catherine. That's awesome. Thank you. So beautiful. And again, people feel free to add your name and organization into the chat box just to say hello. And then after Michael's finished, we're going to be doing some Q&A, but you can also put questions into the chat box during the presentation, and we'll try to field them as Michael speaks. And just much gratitude for Michael for being here, for coming in from the Philippines. We were gonna do an in-person tonight, originally in the Bay Area, and obviously that fell through. And this has been a great way to actually shift it. We were set to do a mass April 7th day of action on public lands, and that's getting postponed too. So this was also gonna be an intro to the National Day of Action to recover public lands. And so here we are, and we're really super blessed to have you on a couple calls prior this week, and we're learning so much as we go. So thank you, and I'm gonna pass.
Yeah, hello, can everybody hear me? Okay, all right. Yeah, I just want to say again, thank you to everybody for this opportunity. It's my first time in the US, and what a time it is. But yeah, I mean, it's good that we have these Zoom calls to maximize what we can. And also, I just want to say again, everybody, you're too kind for me. I'm also learning a lot about the struggles in the U.S. and I think that the more I learn about what's happening in the U.S., I think the more I learn about more similarities I see rather than differences in terms of housing rights movements and urban poor movements and immigrant movements, etc. But yeah, just to give a brief disclaimer about my presentation today, I also want to say that I'm going to cover a range of topics, so I hope to condense them all in the time that we have. And I mean, originally in our organization, these kinds of topics, I guess they would take entire days to discuss, but I'll try to sum it up as best we can so we don't get too much overloaded in terms of information. But yeah, I really like to talk. If there are very, very specific questions, I welcome them very much. But just to get the ball rolling, yeah, can we go next slide, please? I think there's another slide. Yeah, next one. That's just the intro. Yeah, there we are. Yeah, so my organization is called Kadamay. I work as the public information officer in the national office. And basically our alliance means, or our organization, its name means Kalipunan ng Damayang Mahihirap, or the National Alliance of Filipino Urban Poor. It is a national democratic mass organization and alliance. That means we do have individual members as well as member organizations at the community level and even at the national or provincial level. National Democratic, I think, just to briefly explain, it is one of the, if not the largest opposition and left-leaning group in the Philippines. Its main principles is that it believes the Philippines is not a free country. It is a country that is subservient still, or its state is still subservient to imperialist powers. And because of that, it inherently is not a democratic country, and so that democracy needs to be fought for by the people through collective struggle. And Kadamay is 21 years old this year. It's been since 1998, and we do have, according to our last count, which was in early 2018, our last count with our national council meeting was over 200,000 members nationwide, individual members. And like I said, I work with the national office, and though we do supervise the day-to-day operations of Kadamay, but there is the National Council meeting that does more extensive work, although that does not meet as regularly. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I'd like to talk about just briefly first some of the, I guess, case studies of some of the actions that we do, the barricades and the occupation. Barricades, just to differentiate them, the barricades were a tool for us to defend communities from evictions and from demolitions in the Philippines, which have become so very rampant, especially under this regime, under the Duterte regime, which the Duterte regime targets to displace around 500,000 Filipino families by the end of 2022. So that's in the next 2 years. And another And what we try to do with barricades is basically, it's a action of last resort. It's an action that means all the legal avenues, all the possible means to stop the evictions have not come through, which is usually the case. It's a way to we try to expose as best we can how the state inevitably, since it is a servant of imperialism, a servant of reaction, in most cases, if not all cases, it will fail the people in what they want, and it serves the interests of the ruling class. Therefore, the people must take matters into their own hands and during evictions, create physical barricades to defend their communities from hundreds and hundreds of demolition crews and police that come there to take away their homes. And I think what represented a shift, I guess, a narrative change in the work that we do, although we still do organize among urban poor and slum areas to help them defend their communities and to stop demolitions. But we did organize in 2017 an occupation of 12,000 people reclaiming 6,000 homes. And it is the biggest organized occupation of public housing in the country ever. So I think it's a narrative change from just defending our homes to actually claiming our rights, and that's a big shift. But also we're not going to tell people in slums to occupy other houses. But I think there's a difference between the range of issues that we're handling with now, which is not just people who are losing their homes, but people who are already homeless themselves. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to give one slide for what happens, like I said, evictions and demolitions are rampant in the Philippines, especially now. They're popping up because the state is enacting all of these demolition threats for infrastructure projects that benefit big corporations right now. A lot of corporations from China, a lot of corporations from the local corporations, and we've tied up real estate in the global north. So that's very much a rampant thing. It's tearing down people's homes in favor of profiteering projects, and the rampant homelessness, because the public housing in the Philippines is very, very much, despite the fact that it is public housing, it is very much a private enterprise, run like a private enterprise. There's a declining budget. There's a backlog on how many houses the government is building. These government houses are built in areas with virtually no job opportunities and public utilities around. So it's just part of the neoliberal economic push to push people further away into the peripheries, but at the same time trying to profit from them. Bottom line is that the government builds these houses. It evicts people to relocate them into these relocation centers, and then it charges them exorbitant and soaring sky-high amounts, monthly payments, which would amount to, in total, $8,000. And if you're a homeless person in the Philippines, or if you've just been evicted in the Philippines and you live on less than $1, live on less than $3 a day, it's impossible to live for you to be able to afford these public housing. So yeah, and can we just, next slide, please? Thank you. Yeah, so just one of the, I think, prominent barricades that we had more in the past decade is the barricade of Sitio San Roque. And it's a big community in the heart of the city. It has right now it has 7,000 families. It used to have more, but they've been starting doing pocket evictions or small scale evictions throughout the community. But by and large, it is still resisting through barricades and through a number of ways the public-private partnership business that is taking place to evict them. What's happening is the government is sponsoring and facilitating the building of a hotel casino on this land, and that's going to take away the livelihood of all these 7,000 families, bring them to the peripheries to charge them more. So it just illustrates how capital works in the Philippines. It's basically, you get evicted, the government profits off that land. When they bring you to a relocation site, the government and its capitalist cronies and allies profit over that by charging you big amortization rates or the monthly payments, like I mentioned. So in the picture there, it's one of a lot of our. I just want to note also, and it's briefly but importantly, that a lot of our members, if not maybe 95% of our members and our officers in the national office as well, are women. And it is very much a common trend in the Philippines that women are on the front lines of organizing, and women are on the front lines of urban poor movements, especially. It just so happens that I'm the only guy that is came over because I just happen to have uh, a passport. But the one who was originally supposed to come over, our chairperson, is a 70-year-old woman, but there are charges filed against her by the government, so she cannot leave the Philippines. But yeah, briefly notice. So next slide, please. Yeah, so I think the September 23 movement is also in San Roque. No, September 23 is the day that we prevented the demolitions from happening. So what happened was all these dialogues, all these state mechanisms, they basically failed. The city hall didn't listen. The national government didn't listen. Nobody wanted to know. Nobody in power wanted to listen to us. And so the barricade became an increasingly viable and increasingly um, attractive, I guess, option or possible option for the residents. But we had that in mind all along, because we had, through our analysis, that the state is basically a reactionary state. We do anticipate that this was going to happen, so we started building committees among the organized, food committee for people who are watching over the community day and night, security committee. The command committee is important. I think the command committee is something, I don't know if they have that in other countries. The command is basically the guy who makes snapshot or quick thought out decisions. If there is a problem, there's an immediate problem. Let's say the police just crash in. The command is the person who gives the order on what to do. Because this is in an event that there is no time, there is no room for a democratically built consensus. The command is the one authorized to make the decisions for everybody at any given emergency time. So of course there's the health, and the one that I'm always part of, the media committee. I do work as a public information officer, and the media committee is basically tasked uh, to ensure that our message gets across to the public. So yeah, that was an organized defense of San Roque. The residents confronted 800 SWAT who were armed with guns. There was one child that was suffered from tear gas. There was one infant who suffered from tear gas suffocation during that. So that's just to give a picture of the sacrifice also that a lot of residents go through, and they simply have nothing else and nowhere else to go. So they will fight tooth and nail, and they will fight for their houses like these are their lives. Next slide, please. And so the occupation, another action, and I think the basic question, the fundamental question was, why were there so many houses amid such a growing homelessness problem? There were a lot of the Philippines has the most homeless and the most jobless in Southeast Asia. And so what happened was the government kept building these housing sites. As you can see, the grass has grown up to almost the roofs of these housing sites. And so the government has been building these, but at the same time, like I said, they aren't affordable. They aren't to a lot of people. So the homeless population surrounding these housing sites has been growing as well. And what we wanted to expose, as well as that very stark contradiction and irony, was that why is the government catering to real estate developers who get paid to build these housing sites, but it's not actually doing anything for these housing sites to be used by the people who need them the most. And so the occupation was not just to expose this contradiction in a particular community, but to expose that the Duterte government, the current Duterte government, this is one of the slew or one of the many unjust policies that the Duterte government does have in place. Instead of houses, it prioritizes profits of companies, and it prioritizes a lot of, and right now it just prioritizes a lot of violence. You know? I think later I hope I can talk a little about the coronavirus and how it's affecting the urban poor in the Philippines. But yeah, so I think these actions are really important in that they represent two sides of the types of campaigns and the types of movements. What's important also is that they became, next slide, please. Yeah, what's important is also that they become nationally significant actions, and that they also try to expose the deficiencies of the government that are inherently there. And it gives, I'm not trying to say that we just want to make people distrust the government, but we're trying to say that the government and the state, the state is reactionary in itself, and that is something we want to expose. So it's time and again, we don't want to wait for the government to fall flat on their feet. We have to make means to expose their own deficiencies and how anti-people they really are. So we do engage in dialogues. We challenge them to heed the demands of the people. And in the picture here, it's actually the demand of Kadamay that was signed by the government, saying that we would distribute these idle houses. And this was almost a few months before the actual occupation. So we did. So we wanted the government to not have an excuse, basically. So that we had a written agreement, but they did ignore this for many times right after that. So the failed dialogues is what pushed a lot of people. A lot of stories would tell you that even before the occupation, they were already coming to the national government, to the National Housing Authority, so that they could apply for public housing. But when even the application itself is too expensive for a lot of Filipinos, even just paying for the application that you have to sign to get a house is too expensive. So that in itself exposed how, for a lot of people, why the government is actively depriving us of our right to housing. And so next slide. That's the day of the occupation. It was really, I think, the most tiring day of my life. It was 2 days. It was 48 hours of no sleep, just trying to do everything we can, trying to get everybody into their homes, trying to get everybody secure from the police, trying to get it, but at the same time, trying to agitate people, trying to continuously explain why this is happening, what the government's response is, trying to gauge what kind of retaliation was going to come against us, and also just every day manning the barricades and manning the exits and entrances from any police that would want to kick us out. So this happened in the town of Pandi, Bulacan. It was like, again, 6,000 housing units, which have been empty for like 5 to 8 years. Next slide, please. Yeah, that's just more pictures of the first day. The one on the right is the barricade. The one on the left is just it's taken late in the afternoon, because one of the things we did once we secured everybody, it happened so once we secured everybody, we just started to clean all the grass, cut all the grass out, and just try to settle in. But the whole entire occupation started on 3 a.m. At 3 a.m. in March 8th. Basically, the thousands of people, none of them knew. Some of them knew, but most of them did not know that this was the day of the occupation. They only knew a few hours prior, because we didn't want the information getting out to the police. So everybody was just ready. They just knew that in the next few days it's going to happen. And they were ready, and all of them came on the night of March 7, and we waited there until things got quiet. 3 a.m., 12,000 people marched silently through the streets of Bulacan, 12,000 homeless people, and by 4 a.m. we were all in these 6 housing sites. Kadamay national officers were spread out through these 6 housing sites, and I was in one of them, and that's just how it began. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I think these are just some of the pictures of the community assemblies we have. The one on the left is more of a protest, but the one on the right is a community assembly that we have. It's post-occupation community assembly. So these community assemblies are important in the fact that this is also how political education is done by and large. So we try, I think one important shift that we try to do to accommodate such a large number of people is really, well, technically you really need a good sound system. Number two, you need a lot of other assistant facilitators to make sure that everybody's getting the point. Another thing is that it's also a tool to address a lot of community concerns. So for example, even just updates on how we're going to get water, because these sites did not have water, how we're going to get water, how we're going to get electricity, if the government is going to do any kind of retaliation, those important updates that people need to know. So this was the picture on the right. That is a community assembly, but it's also an anniversary picture of the Kadamay. It's a celebration of the occupation. So there was a meeting and some education. It was a whole day thing, and there was also some singing and dancing towards the end. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to, that was just briefly, no, but just to get into, I guess how, I think this is, a lot of people heard about the Occupy in general, so I just went through that, but I think I'd like to talk more about how organizing is done in the Philippines, and I just divided it into different topics. So one is base building. And it all starts, let's say, in a community with no members, no organized people. It all starts in the organizers themselves, who many of whom are full-time organizers. They are voluntary organizers. They do not have salaries. The most that they have, the most I've gotten from Kadamay is 3,000 pesos. That's how much is that in US dollars? Let's say $1 is 50 pesos. So yeah, you can. I think that's around $30 a month. That's how much I get. So that's just to cover like the basic, um, cell phone credits or even just transportation and a little bit of food. But the main goal is really to immerse yourself into these communities, and through your immersion into these communities, you gain political support from the people there, and political support just I guess in the culture of the Philippines. I don't know if it's an international thing, that does entail you being convincing and getting people on board, so you can sleep in their houses, you can eat with them, you do their chores, you're part of their chores. We call that mass work. You do simple chores with them, and at the same time you're also giving political education, giving insight on what we can do, and that in turn gives us contacts and persons. We find we can build chapters at either the block level, community level, city, provincial, regional. Each chapter is around 10 to 15 people, and it starts with a general assembly. Like the chairperson who handles most of the overall stuff, the vice chairperson who handles a lot of the campaigns, the secretary general who handles more of the base building, and of course the education officer. And organizers are also expected or tasked to not just build Kadamay chapters, but to build local organizations. So that means local organizations of, let's say, vendors, local organizations of youth, of women, etc. And all of these kind of work together in a mutual aid, mutual aid, from even the smallest thing to like everybody in the community is asked to give 5 pesos, 5 to 10 pesos for our transportation fees because we got to go to a rally today. Or somebody, like I remember in San Roque recently, what happened was one of our members, because there are security forces who try to evict them there, one of the security forces, one of our members who was pregnant, one security force pulled a gun on her and threatened her point blank to kill her. And then we intervened, so it was stopped. But because of the stress and the trauma, she did have a miscarriage, and we did a lot of community support in the area just to pay for all the medical expenses. So that was really a tragedy, but it was really inspiring to see how people come together to help each other that way. In the picture, that's a picture of another barricade in Malabon, which is also in Manila, but that's it's in Metro Manila, but it's a different city, and that's also another barricade that we've done recently. Next slide, please. Yeah, and I guess this is more my area of work, the campaign and propaganda. So just to, I guess, chronologically tackle it, campaign is basically, I think one distinction is campaign is not just for getting the word out, getting public attention. We campaign to organize. We campaign to recruit. This one of the barometers or measures of success of a campaign is not always if there is a law that is junked, if there is a law that is scrapped, if there is a policy that is overturned. A campaign can be successful if, for example, you recruit 1,000 people during the process, if you recruit 100 people, if you are able to build new chapters, campaign is a tool for you to reach out, and if you reach out, that means you should organize them. So I mean, it's not just a tool for public attention, but what's important about that is line setting, or arriving at a unified analysis on issues and struggles. Let's say, I think personally, the Occupy thing, that was a very tricky thing, because at first we were calling for free housing for the poor. But then we started to assess, we started to look back a few months later, and then we started, it's not the best line. Maybe the better line would be affordable housing, because if affordable housing is a broader range it's a broader range basically. Free is just free, it's one amount, which is zero. But affordable is range from zero to some people who can pay. So it even we thought that the affordable housing could appeal even to middle class folks who were having trouble with their rent, for example. But of course, primarily we were focusing on those that are homeless and those that are urban poor. So that's just one of the things. Campaign building is just how to set a tone, or how to set the facing of the campaign. We open strong, we open with all the things we want to say. There are buildups, and in buildups are engagements with the state. For example, we say something new, we build up we try to engage officials in reacting to kind of snowball the issue, and then we try to expose what these officials are saying are not true, and that they are not, and that we should be listening to the people's demands. And then the peak is basically, with the occupation, the peak was March 8th. That was the peak itself, and that peak kind of extended into the explosion of tension that got. And of course, the closing would be how we move on to another campaign, or step up this existing campaign. Right now, with the terms of the occupation, we're trying to secure the houses for the people, because the government is trying to still to evict them. So it's not so much anymore gaining the house and sending a message. It's about securing the house and then consolidating the people who are living there. And then strategic demands, like I said, this is just basically long-term and short-term demands. Strategic demands are basically junking a law, but I think it's more important to focus on tactical gains, because it gives people a sense of how we can achieve tangible effects, tangible gains through our struggle. Some gains, maybe they'll take years. Some campaigns or some demands will take years, things like that. But I think it's also important how we facilitate all of these things a lot of them is through community consultations. So it's not just us imposing on communities or imposing on our chapters that this is what we got to do, but it's part of a consultation of bridging what we know as organizers, activists, researchers, etc., and what's the reality on the ground, and putting primacy actually on the reality on the ground, because ultimately that's what we've got to work with. The Occupy itself was not our idea, was not the idea of anybody from any organizer, anybody from the national office. It was the idea of people in community consultation saying, hey, we're homeless, there's a lot of idle housing here and around our area. Why don't we just occupy that? So that's how we built our campaign around that. We built our propaganda around that. And I know propaganda does have a bit of a negative connotation in terms of here in the US, but for us, when we say propaganda is just truth-telling. It's saying, articulating what is the truth on the ground and getting that out to as many people as we can. So that does work through media work. We write daily press releases. I think on the average in 2019, we wrote, or try to do daily, 4 press releases a week on a variety of issues. And we actually, in our assessment, that was actually a low amount. We should be doing it 7 days a week. And then mass propaganda, or mass prop, that is like the one in the picture, that is our newsletter, Abante Kadamay, which just means forward Kadamay. That is our newsletter, and we try to do that every month. We do have a really big shortage on people who can a lot of writers in the national office. It's just 2 of us. Some people in the national office even have a hard time using computers, because we do encourage a lot of urban poor Filipinos. Our vice chairperson, for example, Kainday Bagasbas, who's from San Roque, she is she did not she only finished third grade in her schooling, but we did try to get more and more urban poor people involved even in the national office. So it's not a very middle class dominated collective of people. So yeah, and then of course online propaganda, which I think everybody does, visual and cultural, which is I think also important. Arts and culture do play a big part in the movement, both in the greater national democratic movement, and with Kadamay itself. We do have a cultural organization that works with us often, and we do theater productions. It's just a way, basically, it's an alternative way of how to tell the story of our struggle and how to inspire people to work towards that. So it's we always say that in terms of propaganda and campaigns, it's we're always just trying to it's I guess there's no indirect English translation, but it's like we're trying to do a sensory overload, so that everywhere somebody will look in the community, there's propaganda. There's something explaining to him the issue. There's something inspiring him to keep fighting. There's something that is telling him that he has rights. So it's just we're just trying to uplift people, because there is a lot of fear in the Philippines, especially under this administration, which has basically weaponized fear against the poor. So yeah, next slide, please. And of course, political education. We do have a curriculum. It's called PADEPA. It is the National Democratic School. PADEPA because Pambansa Demokratikong Paaralan. We do love our acronyms. So it's called the National Democratic School, and it does have a range of it has a range of topics, from introductory courses that are 3 hours to 8 hours a day. It's about introducing the social crises, from tackling how landlessness is a big problem, leads to urban migration to urban centers, and how people are oppressed in urban centers and they're contained in slums, they're brought to the peripheries. And to advance that even more, how history plays a part, and that the history of the Philippines is a history of history of struggles against colonizers, history of struggles against ruling class, and that the people, ordinary working class people, peasants, farmers, workers, urban, poor, indigenous people, they have been at the forefront of moving our history forward. And so we're just trying to educate people on that. And also, of course, one important aspect of all of this is to get a broader understanding of imperialism, feudalism, and bureaucrat capitalism as the basic problems in the Philippines. So these things tie into uh, hopefully our members, and so they see the broader picture that this is not just about housing rights, although it is in big part like about housing rights, or more to day, but we're trying to say that this is in relation to imperialism, to fighting back against a long-standing problem that that the U.S. and other big countries have neo-colonized the Philippines, and how a strike against the reactionary system is a strike against imperialism worldwide, and how we weaken the grasp of imperialism in the country is by strengthening our struggles. And we hope, I mean, our education plans always aim for 100% completion of certain courses. It rarely does happen that 100% people have, like, for example, in a week, if there are 50 members, all those 50 members should have the basic courses. That's really hard to do. It rarely does happen, but we always try to do our best. But what I think is a big deal in all of this is how we are trained to develop instructors pools. So for example, you can start with one person who is tasked with doing a lot of political education. People get more involved, and it's really what we do is we always say we learn by doing. And somebody who is new to the organization may have a flair for undertaking education work, so we put them there, or that person, snowballs into really has a knack for explaining complex things, or a knack for explaining things to a lot of people. So we do tend to put them in education work, which is very important because it is the impetus, the fuel with which we use to organize ourselves. And like I said, arts and culture are also part of that, and they articulate the struggles in so many ways. Aliyah has a question, but it is in another slide, so I'll get to it in a bit. And also Roberta has a question. How do you address and alleviate people's fears to come together and fight? And that is also in another slide. That's one of the big challenges that we have right now. So yeah, I'll get to that in a bit. Can we do next slide first? Yeah, so this is just like, I guess, one of the sayings or summing ups of how we do organize. We arouse people and try to spark political activity into their daily life. Try to see how they are involved. Try to let them see how everything around them is in relation to their struggle and to their problems. We always joke sometimes that even the fact that you don't have water today, because there is a big water problem in the Philippines. The fact that you don't have water today is because of imperialism, and to bridge that is the challenge. Um, so we try to arouse political activity in people, bring them into organizations, and mobilize them in different ways. From ways just some we did do some ways is community mobilizations is just like everybody's asked to bang on their pans and pots and pans at 5 o'clock just to show their resistance. And so more external mobilizations outside the community, like the one in the picture. This was actually Labor Day 2017. So there were a lot of us there, almost 20,000 there. But it wasn't just Kadamay, of course. It was 25,000, not just Kadamay. It was the entire National Democratic Movement. But that was a pretty big mobilization for Labor Day. Just in Manila, this was just in Manila. It was 100,000 nationwide. So yeah, if this is the Araneta tunnel in Quezon City, and we filled it up. Next slide, please. And this was another I guess to put our political educational work, this was a mobilization that we did at the U.S. Embassy because it was, like I said, it was not our idea to occupy, but we felt that we needed to bridge what the occupy meant in terms of how imperialism, globalization, neoliberal policies have all contributed to the displacement and homelessness of our people. And so mobilizing against the U.S. Embassy represented a big, I guess, politically conscious shift into how we do linking and raising, which is what we always say. We link smaller issues to the larger picture, and then back down again, just so that we can see people who are mobilizing are not just mobilizing for their self-interest, but are mobilizing for a greater cause. There's a bunch more questions. Please just put your questions down. I'll try to get to them later on. Yeah, next slide, please. Oh yeah, and so this is, I guess, one of the issues that we've been facing against also is the drug war in the Philippines. So just for anybody who isn't familiar, the drug war did start in 2016, and it started by Rodrigo Duterte, and it does target a lot of urban poor Filipinos. It's basically a tool for fear, and it does not address the root causes of the drug problem in the Philippines. I've personally seen a lot of stories. I've met some people who are GP drivers in the Philippines, or the public transportation in the Philippines, and they do work 18-hour days, and some of them have a hard time working 8-hour days, as would anybody. So what they do is some of them do take a shot of narcotics just to keep them awake. Some people do not do it or do engage in narcotics because they have a economic need for it. But even those who don't are still victimized by this drug war. So we're always saying it's a public health issue, and it's a part of the repression and the fascism of this government. So what they do is when they execute you, they wrap your head in a plastic bag, and they tape it up, and then they shoot you point blank. And that's happened to 30,000 people, mostly in slums. So we keep making these protests of saying that people are rising up, and that these things are related to all our basic economic and problems of repressing or curtailing our civil liberties is directly related to our economic problems. The government is scaring people so much that so that it can do basically all the bad stuff that it wants. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is also, I think, an important topic. And it's one of the reasons why I'm here in the US right now is alliance work. So like I said, Kadamay is a part of the National Democratic Umbrella Group called Bayan or People. There is also a Bayan USA chapter. There is a Bayan Hong Kong chapter. So because Filipinos are everywhere, just because we are. But yeah, but so Kadamay is part of that locally, domestically in the Philippines, and that does help a lot. Like we always say, even the occupation, we cannot do it alone. For example, the clinic that we did, the clinic that we do have in the occupied areas is a part of the workshops and trainings from the church organizations in the Philippines, who are the activist church organizations in the Philippines. So because of them, we do have now one registered nurse in our organization, and a lot of bunch of assistant nurses. Um, and so that helps. And then we do build a lot of issue-based campaigns. So Kadama is also convening the Alianza contra Demolition, or it's basically the Anti-Demolition Alliance, and the Task Force Relocatis, which is a network addressing needs of people in relocation sites. So those are issue-based alliances that work in tandem with Kadamay. And of course, our international solidarity work, which is also why I'm here, is I think the one in the picture is a mobilization we did in Taiwan with a bunch of groups, with the groups from Taiwan, obviously Taiwan, Hong Kong, Thailand, different East Asia representatives from East Asian countries against demolitions and evictions worldwide. So we are, and that's why our calls, our demands are, or our banners are in English, because we were in Taiwan, but they're usually in Filipino. So we try to do that thing on a regular basis because linking up our struggles is so important for mutual support and in so many other ways. And because Kadamay is generally a believer in internationalism, in that we do have everybody does have a lot of similar problems, similar struggles, similar enemies. And that, like I said, increasingly in the US, I think I'm seeing a lot of similar characters or characteristics of different organizations. And that just means that the reactionaries of the world are linking up, and they're cooperating on how to oppress the people. And I think oppressed people should be doing the same. Next slide, please. So just like I just to add to what Aliyah was asking in the comments, how does Kadamay work and strategize with other sectors? We do have a bunch of caucuses monthly or sometimes even weekly with different sectors in the Philippines: women, youth, workers, peasants, etc., all of indigenous people. We do have campaign caucuses. We do collaborate on a lot of our education work as well. We call it ED Fest or ED festivals or education festivals. So they are just like a whole day or 2-day activities where everybody goes through different courses, and it's hosted in schools, in communities, and anywhere that will have us basically. So we do help each other on those kinds of things, and it just helps because simply put, I guess we just speak the same language. I mean, not literally because of Filipino or anything. We seek the same language in terms of having the same principles, having the same analyses, common analyses, or at least a unified analysis on the most important aspects of the struggle, which is that imperialism, bureaucrat capitalism, feudalism is the problem, and those 3 basic problems translate into other, or give birth to these host of problems of evictions, of low wages, of contractual work, of budget cuts to education and health and services, and land grabbing of indigenous people. So it's really just how we materialize all these links between all these other movements, and it makes it feel it does make it not just seen, it makes it just see the bigger picture and see the how our struggle impacts on other sectors, etc. So, and then There's one challenge, I guess, just to get into. Oh, sorry. There's another question. Um, how can working class Filipino communities outside of Filipinos outside of Philippines who have experienced forced migration, now experiencing neoliberalism and gentrification in the diaspora, build joint movements with the urban core of the Philippines? I think it's really there are so many ways. It's really a matter of establishing good ties and consistent relationships with the different movements abroad. So we do, for example, Kadamay is part of the ILPS, the International League of People Struggle, and it's also part of the International Alliance of Inhabitants, both of which contribute to the broadening and the strengthening and the amplification of our demands, calls, and initiatives. For example, Kadamay is hopes to, fingers crossed, because of everything that's happening, hopes to host a sort of international delegation of people from various countries this year, towards the end of this year, but everything is still in the works. But we do host a lot of exposure trips to the Philippines, and that's one way to foster solidarity. I get to another question in a bit, but I just want to say that here in this slide that we're seeing is that these are one of the biggest challenges we're having at the moment. That the Duterte government has tagged Kadamay as a communist terrorist organization. Please don't bother with either being communist or terrorist. For the Duterte administration, it's basically the same thing, which it isn't. But for them, it's the same thing. And because of their national task force to end the local army communist armed conflict, they have weaponized the bureaucracy. So a lot of, even the housing agencies in the Philippines, there are 7 housing agencies. All of them are now run by military or former generals. So it's just weaponizing the bureaucracy in so many ways. And even the social services department is run by a military official. And what they're trying to do is basically crack down on activists. I think I mentioned the drug war earlier, and it's just terrible now how they're merging both the drug war and this crackdown or the counterinsurgency campaign is they're merging or they're overlapping. So you're either a terrorist, a communist, or a drug addict. Either way, you can get shot by the police, you can get arrested. You can get, like I said, our chairperson now does have a case filed against her. We have 7 organizers in jail right now. We do have a lot of other people who have criminal cases against them. I myself was labeled by the former police chief as a terrorist spy of sorts. So it's a lot of people ask how do I deal with it, but it's so common now. It's like it's almost as common as coronavirus, being tagged as a terrorist by the government. So those kinds of things, and it's also that the government sees what Kadamay does as basically a part of the guerrilla movement of the New People's Army in the Philippines, because there is a big armed guerrilla movement in the Philippines fighting against the status quo. And they do have arms, they do have guns, but Kadamay does not. But it's just easier for the government to lump together all its enemies into one basket and to say that, oh, you guys have guns anyway, so we're just going to shoot you, arrest you, and all those things. Next slide, please. Yeah. So some of the things we're facing on a daily basis, in Pandi, for example, these pictures are from military goons stationed in Pandi in the occupied areas already. You can see that they've claimed on the picture to the left, they did kick somebody out of their house to claim it as an office, as a military outpost. So there is urban militarization going on. And they are creating paramilitary groups. These paramilitary groups have functioned as the ones who are launching arson attacks, a lot of intimidation. They are facilitating a lot of the illegal searches. They are serving as police assets for the arrests, and they are recruiting people to become to pretend as surrenderies of the NPA. What they're saying is basically, The government is not going to give you a house because you're a Kadamay member, because the government says you're a terrorist. So you should just come with us, join with us. Just say that you had a bunch of guns before and you were a terrorist, and then we'll give you 100,000 pesos, which they don't. And you leave and you never be part of the organization again. And to people, personally, we do not have any ill will or ill feelings to people who do accept these offers, because we do not have 100,000 pesos to offer people. And sometimes in situations of extreme poverty, that is a sad reality. But what we try to do is not condemn people. We try to bring them back into organization and say that you were a victim, basically, of these people who are manipulating you. And we should speak out against this manipulation, because they do all this work to manipulate you, to repress you, to all these violent attacks. It's almost like they're doing everything but grant you your rights. And so that gives a lot of people hope to speak out against how all these manipulations are going on. So we do continue to resist, organize, and oppose this oppression of the Duterte regime against the people. So it's not just, it's really not just Kadamay who is being targeted. It's all activists, individuals, organizations who are even remotely critical of the Duterte regime. And right now, just quickly with the coronavirus, yesterday I did receive news that there was one community inside Metro Manila. Metro Manila is on lockdown, so that means nobody can go out of their homes, and that is very much impossible for people who are homeless and people who live in close quarters to keep up with the social distancing in slums. And I received news yesterday that one community was torn down, which is supposed to be illegal. One community was demolished, people were evicted, so now they're out on the street. And if you're out on the street, that's also illegal, so they're going to be put in jails. And then just yesterday as well, there was outside Manila, there's an activist, a peasant organizer, who was shot dead by police and by military officers. So it is like they are suspending all civilian activities so that they can do a lot of repression and things that are involved with the de facto martial law that is in place right now in the Philippines. Next slide, please. Oh, maraming salamat sa inyong lahat. So thank you very much. And those are the people of Pandi in our occupied areas, just waving, waving to you all. Yeah. I haven't gotten to all the questions, sorry. I think can I get to them now? Is that okay?
Yeah. And if people want to also unmute themselves and ask, but yeah, feel free. Maybe Roberta had a question earlier about what conversations look like. Yep.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is true that I think what the Duterte government has done successfully in communities is really the fear. I think it's one of the biggest challenges we have now. People don't want to get organized. A lot of people don't want to get organized not because they don't want to, but they fear for their lives, basically. And it is us just trying to work around this fear, and maybe sometimes starting small, not necessarily saying that, okay, you got to do this, join rallies, education, etc. But starting small, and how maybe a few meetings, a few group discussions can help to alleviate some of allay people's fears a little bit, and how articulating basically that what we're doing isn't illegal, isn't unjust, and so there is no problem doing with it. A lot of times in organizing, it's also about identifying, and this may be I don't know in English, because we identify the advanced sections of the community first, and not to say that everybody is not advanced, or it's just maybe it's a language thing, but people who are advanced, meaning that they are more open to political activity, despite the fact that there are these problems with repression, etc. So it's a matter of getting the people who are ready to be on board, and then helping with them to mobilize the other people who may be on the fence or hesitating. And it just gives people, it just puts people at ease to see that other people are mobilizing as well. But yeah, again, it is really a big problem, the fear in the communities. Another question is, what are some specific challenges you're seeing from the Duterte regime? I think, yeah, the fear is one thing, as I mentioned, and then it's the counterinsurgency methods and all the repression. Um, One challenge that I have personally encountered, because I do work in communications or propaganda, is that the Duterte regime, like other authoritarian or fascist regimes all over the world, they do have a super developed fake news mechanism of some sorts. They do have thousands of trolls. They are strangling media into not reporting about people's issues and people's organizations. They are censoring you online and in so many other ways. So that kind of thing is a big challenge, but it just goes to show that we always prioritize offline over online and low tech over high tech, because those things seem to work the best for us. Um, and one other question is how is common and unified analysis developed? Common and unified analysis developed through discussion, uh, through basically, I'm losing the English word for this, but through basically just having a back and forth of discussion with other people. For example, this coronavirus is something that definitely did not immediately have a unified analysis. Um, who is in favor of the lockdown, who is opposed to the lockdown? But it's just trying to arrive at a consensus through discussion and through shared principles that we have on the onset to develop these analyses. But again, there are a lot of debates, a lot of meetings. Some meetings take days just to develop these even a few things. How do organizers develop the discipline to follow and exercise the collective line? Uh, it's because everything is coursed through collective discussion. So it's like even a statement is coursed through collective discussion. Even a decision to hold a certain activity is coursed through collective discussion, and that's just basically because we're always together a lot of the times. I have lived in houses with, we call it our collectives, and lived with my collective for long periods of time, just because it's not because I want to be with them, but they are cool people. But because, but mainly because we need to be together all the time. If there's something that we need to decide on quickly, we need to be together, and we need to live in the same house, eat the same food. Basically, yeah, that kind of thing is how collective struggle works. And we always say simple life and hard struggle. So we try to avoid being distracted by a lot of things. But we do have some downtime. I'm sorry. Yeah.
And I just wanted to just open it up too, because we have about 10 minutes left. If there's other questions from the field, if people want to voice those, you can unmute yourself either on Zoom or by pressing *6 if you're on your phone. If you'd like to add any questions in there.
Yeah, sure. I just want to say one quick more thing about having a unified analysis. Is basically, I know it's different in a lot of countries, but it's it's a practice to get the ball rolling, to unite on what you can unite. If you can unite on certain issues, then I think it's important to do that. Maybe not on everything, but it's important to have that practice as a benchmark, I think. Yeah.
Any questions out there?
Yeah.
It did look like there was one question from Virginia in the chat box around why do you think the government has not moved against those who took over the housing?
Oh, yeah. Actually, they did. A lot of times they did. We occupied in March 8, 2017. And throughout that entire month, more or less, they were trying to evict us left and right. They were sending cops. They were bribing a lot of media people to say bad things about us. But we did mobilize both in the community and outside the community. We tried to make the issue as big as possible. Through alliance work, we tried to get more people involved, people who are not traditionally supporters of Kadamay, people who are it really did polarize public opinion. So we tried to get the people who were in support of this speak out, explain why they are in support of this. Because the movement is the way that it is, we got in touch with activist lawyers who helped us negotiate with the National Housing Authority and basically say that evicting Kadamay is against their economic and social cultural rights. We did have the help of a lot of church folk, people who work in the church, to even talk about the occupation in their Sunday Mass. So that just got made the issue more prominent there, and then it made our argument more prominent, and it made we tried to basically debunk what the government was saying. They were saying we were trespassers, we were terrorists, we're criminals, etc. And we were saying no, this is an extra legal political action that was done, and it was born out of the fact that there are so many unjust policies in the country today, and occupations won't stop unless these unjust policies stop, unless homelessness, we are taking steps towards resolving homelessness, urban poverty, etc. But that was 1 month, and then a lot of months after that, there were a lot of they're still doing that now. Right now, we're trying to secure what we call entry passes in the occupied areas. Entry passes basically means that you're a certified resident there, even if they've been living there for a while, but it just gives that sort of sense of security, and it does entitle you to other social services or welfare services. But the government is trying to prevent that. They're basically saying, if you are a Kadamay member, you cannot gain an entry pass. So we're trying to work against that right now. Yeah.
Thank you. And, oh, looks like one shot up from Megan there.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. Things to support Kadamay campaigns in the Philippines. Number one, we are, again, I would like to reiterate, I think Aliyah was with us back in December, and we're very, very happy to host more people for even longer periods of time, just to have a kind of mutual learning experience, and also a mutual experience of solidarity between organizations and people. So that's one thing. Another thing is that right now we are in the, I guess we are in the time of coronavirus, and we are going to circulate. Kadamay is going to circulate a statement of support for the urban poor and homeless in the Philippines, and we are trying to get a lot of not just U.S. but actually domestically in the Philippines and internationally, people who can give what they can to in the form of donations, so that we can buy food for people in urban poor homes, because you're not allowed to work, and you need a job to pay. Working 1 day pays for your food and expenses for that day. So if you can't work for a month, it's a lot of people are already saying that they won't survive the next few weeks, so they're gonna go hungry. And we are going the rounds for donations for that. Another thing that can help is just generally, I think for a lot of folks in Right to the City and housing rights groups and human rights groups all over here, all over the US, I think it's important just to have good ties, good relationships, politically, even personally, that's to support the people in the Philippines. And we also do try to support other causes internationally as best we can, because it's like I said, I think it's important to just see all the similarities that we do have aside from the differences. And I think we do have a lot of similarities, and we're better off helping each other out. And that just applies to a lot of case-to-case basis things. I mean, if the April 7 action did happen, we would be glad to support it in some way. We do have what we call World Zero Eviction Days. There's just a call for zero evictions in October. We do have those kinds of things that we can just echo everywhere, and just generally learning from each other on a regular basis.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions or comments from the field? Okay. Oh, yes.
This is Virginia, and I'm with the Poor People's Campaign. Ed Romano told me about this event. I'm happy to have been present for this. And I just think you've done an amazing job. And we're basically still pretty new at this. And we also supported Moms for Housing. But I'd like to explore our linking arms with you because our purposes are basically the same and what we're fighting is basically the same.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's nice to hear that. I just talked to somebody from Dominique from Moms for Housing the other day, and I was just telling her that basically, I heard about Moms for Housing from our moms who were happy to hear that there's something like that happening in the U.S. and they were telling me, hey, there's other moms in another country doing something similar, and they were really happy to hear about that.
Like with you, it's certainly not popular, but with other poor people, it is.
It is, yeah, that's true.
Great. Anybody else? Okay. If not, then if we can go to the final slides just to close out, Kamal. And just thank you so much, Michael, for being on.
Yeah.
And for
thank you again.
Yeah, and Amy for helping set it up, and Amy Chu from Policy Link, and for everybody for getting on and showing love. And I can see people taking rigorous notes. And this is going to be recorded, and we can put it out to folks for those who did sign up for the call today. If you're interested in joining Homes for All in our movement, again, as Carmina talked about, the Our Homes, Our Land track, which is focused on alternative models of housing that are non-market based. We also do renters' rights organizing across the country and here in California as well. Feel free to reach out to us. There, you can sign the pledge, the Homes for All pledge there on the screen. Next slide, please. And if you want to reach out for any more information, feel free to email us at info@homesforall.org. Yeah, Carmina, you want to say anything else?
Good. This was really enlightening. I found it just really enlightening to hear about the struggle that's going on in the Philippines. And I really appreciate you coming through, Michael, to share what's going on over there.
Beautiful.
Thanks,
Any
y'all.
other?
Oh yeah, one more thing is that if anybody wanted to support the Reclaim LA efforts, I could put that link on the chat box as well.
Yeah, if you could, that'd be great.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank
you, everybody, again. I'm just gonna post some contact infos. I think
please.
People who want to get in touch with me, I'd really like to get in touch with anybody who's want to learn more about Kadamay, and I do want to learn more about orgs in the US. I'm just gonna post it in the chat box.
Yeah, and Michael, you're gonna be in the States for a couple more weeks?
Yeah. I'll be here until the 13th of April.
Oh wow, cool.
I'm here in Oakland right now.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much again, Michael, for doing this and for holding it down. It's so beautiful, so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah,
All right, everybody.
Thank you again.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.